We've got a great group today to cover this topic. Let me just walk you through our purpose, the presenters, and the flow of the session. So our goal here is to help both luxury builders and their integrator trade partners to rediscover and redeploy emotional and experiential sales presentation techniques for technology. I am your moderator for the session, John Galante. I'm the president of AE Ventures, the folks that produce the Tech Home Builder Summits. And I'm joined by Dave Donald, who is the VP with Wilson Electronics. I've known Dave for a couple of decades, and he's one of the most passionate salespeople I know in the custom installation world. Also joining us is Mike Moore. I previously had listed next to Mike's name just himself, but he has a lot of different brands. I think for purposes of this session, let's call out Mike's role as the coach on sales and peak performance. But there are other things that he's done. Again, a couple of decades of knowing Mike and working with Mike on helping builders move fast forward with tech. And then George Katsiris, who is the VP of Product help me with it, George. You're a product evangelist, right? VP of Product Evangelism?
Yes, sir. Product evangelist.
Yeah, and George is with Savant. Now, I haven't known him for 20 years. I've known him for about 24 hours. But really excited to have George joining us, and Savant is the sponsor for this session. And of course, they're right down the road from us in Hyannis, and AE Ventures is here in suburban Boston. So here's what we're going to do today. It's 4 big questions. You can see them outlined there. We're going to give each of the panelists a shot at the questions and probably a shot at each other. And then hopefully we will come away with some good tips and techniques for, again, luxury builders and their trade partners on the integration side of things, selling with passion, selling with emotion. So with that, let me move to our first question, which is kind of foundational here. And it's why is it important to get buyers to want something emotionally? And I would bracket that with the idea of for relief of pain or for aspiration as a premise to selling with the facts. Let's start with you, Dave Donald, with a response to that foundational question.
Well, having spent my entire life in sales, I have to admit that nothing is ever sold. Everything is bought. And so really all we can hope to do as salespeople is to be able to influence people's decision in our favor. And the best way to do that, the absolute most impactful way to do that, is to get an emotional experience in the mind of the buyer. That's what we're after, because people frankly make all of their decisions emotionally. It makes no difference how analytical you are. You make emotional decisions and you back them up afterward with the facts. And unfortunately, in a technical world, people tend to depend on the techs and specs when really what they should be dealing with is the emotion. If you can get someone to emotionally buy in, then deciding on which brands or the price of the product, all of that changes dramatically. And it's more so with the luxury buyer than it is with any other group, because they are looking to invest, yes, what appears to us to be lots of money, but to them, they're much more interested in the outcome. And that's really what we're after here. So building up this emotional impact is what's going to get them to move forward. And when they look at all the technology that's involved, it will just back up the emotional experience they already have.
Mike, what are your thoughts?
Full agreement with Dave that nothing's ever been sold. We've kind of fooled ourselves over the years into a sales process when what we need to be is the guide in the buying process. And it's easier for us to talk about stats and especially with technology, but it's easier for us to give reason rather than emotional contact. And then if you split that up with the males that are involved in this, us men don't talk about emotions very well. And so we want to logic and reason our way. And as Dave said, we don't make the decision. Even an analytical, you can't give an analytical enough information for them to make a decision. They will keep gathering information. That's what a good CFO does. They don't make decisions, they gather information. So from that standpoint, you have to be able to connect with the buyer. We became, over the last 10 or 15 years, the home became a fashion item. In 2008 at Big Builder, it was discussed by The Economist that the home had replaced the car as the new American icon. And we miss that sometimes, and we're selling shelter rather than lifestyle and the emotions of living in my home. And new homes versus old homes that haven't been lived in, or used homes, technology has the greatest impact in making that home new. And in the Lux market, if I buy new, I expect it to have the latest and greatest features. I don't expect to buy something that's old, and I want choices. So the emotional side of this is, are you really talking to them? And we're going to talk deeper about this in the session, but are you really talking to the buyer about what it means to them rather than what you're talking about? Are you just talking about what it is and what it does, or are you talking about what it will mean to them? And I'll get deeper into that as we get into the next question.
Well, I mean, to me, an interesting question. I've been through too much sales training the last 10 years. Sandler is one of the well-known in-person selling techniques out there, and they certainly believe that you need that emotional want to have it. I think an interesting question, though, is they side on the pain side of things, right? They think they're saying 90% of sales, you have to have the pain factor before you get the right emotional viewpoint. I'm wondering whether that's not the case so much for a luxury buyer, because there typically is less pain there and more aspiration.
And for home buyers.
Yeah.
Home buying is more aspirational at all price points, because even in an entry-level buyer, it's an aspiration to a better life. And so, yeah, I think you've hit on a good point there. All of what we're talking about, the most impactful stuff is aspiration, not so much pain relief.
Yeah. Hey, George, what are your thoughts? You've worked with a lot of integrators, and Savant certainly is a big player on the luxury technology side of things. How important is that emotional piece?
Well, I agree with my colleagues here that it is absolutely about buying, not about selling, and that all those purchases are typically driven by emotion. But I guess I would take it a step further and say, then, instead of repeating what they already said and how to resonate there, is what are those specific emotional product buying motives? And to your point, it isn't necessarily limited to pain or aspiration. In fact, some of the most well-known points are pride, attraction towards the opposite sex, affection for your family, comfort. There's all these different check boxes and wanting to be able to show off to folks or whatever it is. So those are all part of that emotional decision. And I also point out that maybe pain is somewhat relative. So if you're a security company, you might be selling against the emotion of fear. Whereas in the luxury space, the pain points just change. It's more of a pain in the ass than it is physical pain or some other kind of pain, to have to get up and go around the house and make sure all the doors are locked or all the lights are off or this and this. And so it's still checking that box. But to be honest with you, I think it affects more of some of the pride and fashion. I love the idea that Mike was saying there, the home is the new American icon. It is the new fashion statement. Like you were saying there also, John, but it's some of those other boxes that it checks: attraction, affection, and comfort.
So what do we think some of the keys to eliciting emotional desire for purchase are from a luxury buyer? Mike, why don't you kick us off on that? How do you get to those emotions?
One of the first issues is to have a real conversation and listen, and to actually ask the buyer why they're buying a new home instead of a used home, or why they're looking for a new home, or what's important to them about a new home.
Yeah.
But not listening for facts. Again, you have to be listening for those emotions and feeling them. Since most communication is nonverbal, are you connecting, and do they trust you enough to start to share with you? So
well, how do you get to that trust? Because somebody doesn't want to. We've all been sold to, right? And we we know that salespeople are trying to dig that stuff up. What are some ways to comfortably get that shared?
The intention to make a sale is selfish. And if you really want to increase your sales, you need to do nothing out of selfish intention or vain ambition. If you can get in your core that your job is to help, people want help. It's interesting, during the last 30 years, consumers' number one thing they want when they shop is help. They no longer equate that to a salesperson. That's why they'd rather talk to a kiosk or gather information for themselves, because they know they're being sold. So you have to extract, and John, we've known each other a long time. That's my premise for now the last 25 years, is stop selling and start helping. But that isn't something to put on. You can't fake it. Do you really want to help that person? They'll feel it. They'll open up. If they're not opening up to you, it's because they can feel you're wanting to make a sale. And salespeople will admit, going into an appointment or a call or greeting someone, they hope to make a sale. You have to extract that intent. I just want to help as many people as I can. And if you can do that, they'll open up and share what it is they're looking for.
Yeah. George, what are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, I totally agree with that. I think that there's kind of two sides to that coin. One is they're talking to you for a reason. So there already is some innate thing that as Mike said, you're trying to pull out of them, figure out what emotional thing are they bringing to the table to begin with. And on that one, I agree that our dealers, I used to be a dealer before I was with Savant. So 15 years ago, I started at Savant, but for the 4 years before that, I was an integrator. And I would say that was one of those big lessons learned from that period, was people are coming to you for a reason, figure out why. But one of my last clients I had before I came to Savant was somebody who struggled so much with the concept of me being anything other than a technology consultant. He didn't want, every other contractor on the job was cost plus, everything was transparent. And then here's this, AV guy who's got maybe a little bit more obscure brands or margins and things like this. And he trusted me and wanted to just hire me as a technology consultant and just get the information. So I totally agree with that. If people could, as dealers and integrators, view themselves in their primary role as technology consultants, because you do know about this stuff. That's why I'm coming to you, and to connect that with whatever my initial, intention is from an emotional point of view. But the other half of your question, the other side of that coin, is what you're saying in terms of keys to eliciting that emotional one is maybe uncovering some that they don't know that they want. And I think that that's important. And the key there is same thing, like we talked about before, maybe showing them some of those things that they didn't even know and that they can connect to, and that will strike the nerve with those other emotions and get them to want to know more.
Mm-hmm. Dave, how about you? What's your point of view?
Well, first of all, I believe people only buy one thing, period. They only buy one thing, and that is they buy how they imagine they're going to feel after they bought. So think about that. You're selling an imaginary emotion. Could you be more vague? I don't think so. So when you're talking to anyone and they're making this decision, that's what you're after, is creating something that they're going to feel after they bought. Now, with the luxury buyer, and specifically with the luxury buyer, every one of us wants to feel special. We want to feel unique. That's important. But with the luxury buyer, they can afford to be exactly that. That's why they buy the particular Ferrari with the package that nobody else on their block can afford. That's the reason that they are building this home with 3 pools instead of just 2, because it's a unique experience for them. And because they want to feel unique. In our business, this is the easiest thing in the world, because we have got options ad infinitum to be able to make them feel unique. Let me tell you what we're going to do. When you walk into your bedroom, the system is going to address you by name, because the bioscan that we have built into this will actually recognize you as you walk in, and it'll say, did you really want to listen to new age music again? You've been listening to that for 3 weeks. Whatever. The point is that selling a luxury buyer, finding a way to give them the feeling that this is going to be a unique thing. My neighbors aren't going to have it. It's not going to be the same as everybody else. That is absolutely huge when you're selling to the luxury buyer.
how do you get them to open up about those dreams and aspirations, I guess?
That's why I get paid the big bucks. I'm not going to give that away here. What are you, out of your mind? No, the point is you start asking what they want and why. Tell me what, when the guy walks in and says, yeah, I want a TV that's going to fill that entire wall. Really? That's interesting. Why? Why do you want to have a TV that fills? Because when my friends come over and they sit down in these theater seats that we're going to put in here and we're watching the big game, I want it to feel like the linebackers are coming right into my living room. Ooh, right. Wow. File that away as this is what matters. And the other exciting thing about that, if you've ever read Spin Selling by Neil Rackham, one of his comments is the questions that are what we call need payoff questions that get an individual to tell you why they want what you're selling. Because at that point, you are rehearsing them. Less than 15% of the buying decision ever takes place while you're sitting in front of the client. It's all taking place when they're talking to their wife or their nephew or, you know, whatever. And when their wife says, why in the world do we need a TV that fills that entire wall? Ah, already got the answer. You rehearsed him beforehand. So those are the kinds of questions that I ask. And it's always why. Well, just tell me why.
I've got this question about why is it so tempting to go feature crazy on tech selling? I'm going to rephrase that a little bit. I think it's not just tempting, but there is this particular challenge with technology in terms of helping the customer imagine what, especially we get into categories like home automation that aren't as familiar as like the AV set of stuff. You do have to walk through some of the feature set in order for the customer to understand or imagine how that's going to play out in their lives. But I guess my question would be, how do we resist the temptation of going too far with that? Well, how do we know when there's enough facts and technical stuff that's been provided and not go so deep that we lose the emotional element? I'll throw that one up as a jump ball.
I'll tell you, there is no question that when you get into a situation where you're giving too much tech, it's like they're foundering. I mean, they're going to be, they're in the ocean without a life preserver. And we run into that all the time where we start talking about, you know, the bifurcated diverter valves and the left-handed 4x-siders, and they start going, and you can see it on their face. If you're not prepared for that, just watch for that, because you're going to run into guys that are techie. Yeah. You're going to run into guys that want more details. But the fact is that you got to watch your audience, man. And when they start responding with their eyes glazing over, you know, you've gone too far.
Yeah. Doesn't this get to, though, preparation as well? Is that as marketers and salespeople on the tech side of things, we have to find that more concise, you know, easy way to explain what a product does. And a lot of times we just don't have the time, right? The product came out, we've got this long set of features that the engineering department came up with, and we haven't taken the time to really boil it down and simplify it for the customer.
Easy pattern, John. What it is, what it does, what it means to you. Yeah. Every time you open your mouth as a salesperson, if you're talking about what it is and what it does, and you don't finish with what it means to them, yeah, you're back to Dave's point. You're just wah, 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 wah. And it's easy to talk about what we know and never translate it. The old feature, advantage, benefit. We talk about features and advantages all day long, and we think the advantage is a benefit. No, if you can't say the phrase, salespeople I teach, I say, how many times do you say what that means to you? Because if you don't translate it to that and have a conversation of what that'll mean to them, then all of the what it is and what it does is a waste of time.
This final question is, what are the best techniques you've seen or used for selling tech to luxury buyers? And I characterize this as like a signature move, like, you know, a question that you would ask, getting somebody to talk about X, Y, and Z that really gets that emotional response and opens up other opportunities. Anything come to mind? George, you're up first on this one.
You got to show them. You just got to show them what it is and give them a little taste of that in the most experiential, direct way. Where we have an experience center in New York City, and I've given over 1,000 tours there, and there's no close second in terms of the magic of just when they first get into the space everything's turned off, the shades are closed, the lights are dimmed, you know, that we say arrive or whatever it is that we want to trigger. Shades open, TV turns on, but on mute, the music turns on here, the lights turn on there, all of this stuff starts happening, and you just see, you know, the lights turn on upstairs, and they can now directly imagine themselves in their own homes with the same things going on, and you pretty much closed it before you say anything else.
Gotcha. And for a luxury builder that doesn't have a model home to show that, it's integrator showroom, it's their own home where they've tricked things out. What you know, what's the environment for that luxury builder that doesn't have the luxury of a model?
Well, in the modern COVID era, we're doing a lot more online, even through virtual tours and things like that are helping. But honestly, even the demo mode of our app on you know, the App Store, which is free, and you can go and start to check out what that user experience is going to be. Always start with user experience. If it's has to be an app you know, demo, fine. If it could be the full-blown in-person demo, even better.
Cool. Dave, thoughts from you?
I love prepping prepping that demo. There is nothing more impactful for me than taking a high-end client to the door of the home theater and stopping there and saying, okay, after you walk through this door, there's a good chance that your life will never be the same. And I'm telling you this right now because I've got too many people that I've walked through this door who all of a sudden their mind was blown and they went, oh my gosh, I had no idea. Prepare yourself for this and then open the door and let them in. I'm telling you, they get goosebumps before they walk through the door. And then of course, the art of the demo is set up appropriately. So just the right scene plays at just the right time. And it's not just explosion, blow them up guys. You know, we were using the scene, one of the scenes from The Greatest Showman that was nothing but this incredible, you know, dance and musical performance. But I'll tell you, by the time people got done, I had people literally catching their breath. By the time it was finished, it was like, oh my gosh, that's what we're after. That's what you're selling. And it is more impactful, as you were saying, first of all, as Mike made the comment, selling from the top down. Make sure that when you get into this conversation, you've already mentioned that, well, the last theater we did was $600,000, but you don't have to go that deep. You know, there's a lot of things. This guy may be wearing a $250,000 wristwatch. So you don't have to worry about money. In fact, money is never the conversation until you get to the point where you have to give them an invoice. But by that time, they're so emotionally involved in this thing, it's done. And that's just the way I feel about it. But setting that up so they realize, because to me, personally, as an individual, this stuff is the most incredible stuff in the world. It just is. And I have to communicate that to them. And if I don't do that, 300%, they're not going to get it.
Mike, get in here with your thought.
Demo, as both have said, you know, and the more live and more real that demo is, virtual works. I'm a big, John, you know, from years, online design studio. Virtual can help. And in this day and age, you're going to need all of the virtual and 3D and video work you can possibly add. But nothing beats that live experience, because we're selling, moving them from a house to a home. And it's interesting, Dave mentioned it, because we're going to now make their home the greatest show on earth. And that's the feeling, moving that forward. Do you want to make your house just a home or the greatest show on earth? Do you want that experience that will enhance your lifestyle? So it's setting that stage and then demoing how it's going to enhance their lifestyle, how it's going to make them feel when those things happen, and get them talking about it, because it is breathtaking. It's the demos of these. That's the shame on us as a home building industry, that we've been selling old homes that haven't been lived in and calling them new. And we've been selling new home fixer-uppers that need more to them to be new. If you don't have your home up to speed technologically, if it's not connected, if it doesn't entertain you, it's not a new home. It's an old home or a new home fixer-upper. Just as simple as that.
Guys, we're out of time. Lots of excellent tips in this session. I really appreciate you sharing. Thanks so much to Savant for sponsoring this session. And we'll see you at the next luxury track session. And thanks so much.